Assalamualaikum everyone and welcome to day 7 of the 20 by 20 Wellbeing Challenge. Your host here, Shana from Wellbeing with my co-host.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you and welcome back. This is Shazia Loving and we're here back with you for another incredible session with a superb speaker. And as always, our topics are going to be around the quote of Imam Ali, which is you presume you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire individual.
Profound indeed. Every speaker so far touched upon first very well. You just give a rundown. We had so far, day 1 we had Elzein about look within you.
Yes. And day 2, Brother Elzein, who spoke about movement.
Day 3 we had Sister Sarah speaking about Sukoon.
And then we had day 4, we had Sister Shiri, who spoke about relationships.
Day 5 we had speaking about communication.
Yeah.
Filled in with the
Yes. And then day 5, day 6, we had Sister Padmana, who spoke about her very personal story on miscarriage. And I think all this has been incredible and we look forward to an amazing more sessions to come.
And today we have a charismatic individual, someone with a mountain of knowledge, inshallah, we will profile just now. But just to thank everyone for being here every day. We've completed the 2 days of Ayam Fatima, and inshallah, we're going to have sessions every single day now until 12th of December. You log in. For all those who want to reach out, you have the email address. Whatever you want to reach out, strictly confidential. It is email@tsimcdubai.com. We have a WhatsApp number which is 043982121. Now, I think without further ado, and apologize for starting a bit late today, had some stream issues, but inshallah, let's get into the profile of our speaker today.
I think everyone's talking about the sound.
Sound, they can't hear us
We
now.
get,
Okay.
just a few technical issues and we'll all be sorted.
Okay.
If you can someone type in the comments, please, that yes, you can hear us loud and clear now? Okay, sound not clear, still coming out. Is sound not clear? Are we clear? Okay, I think we've gotten a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we have our very own Sheikh Wael in the studio. Sheikh Wael began his speaking career officially in 2004, in where he recited his majalis in Al Mahdi Center in the Muharram of 2004. He has delivered many speeches on various occasions in different centers around the world. Many of the lectures can be found online. He then moved to Windsor, Ontario in 2006 to join the Imam Hussein Foundation, the Hausa, which further gave him an opportunity to expand his studies with different scholars. Now residing in Ottawa, Sheikh Wael still serves the podium of Imam Hussein. Sheikh Wael also worked on establishing different youth club programs in various cities, mainly in the province of Ontario. His aim is to create a fraternity of Muslim youth in the West to prepare them to become leaders of tomorrow. In 2013, he moved back to Ottawa and was one of the founders of the 313 Youth Organization, which later developed to become the ARC Center of Excellence. The center offered youth counseling, weekly sessions on different topics, mainly the challenges that face the youth in the West, plus regular lectures on Quran, tafsir, history, and aqidah. We're very fortunate today to have Sheikh Wael in studio with us. So, Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Assalamu
Alaikum warahmatullah, thank you for having me.
No,
No,
thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry for the delay.
Lala,
And for the people that are not from Dubai, like the traffic here is brutal. It's unbelievable.
yeah, I mean, everyone I think is looking forward to hearing from you, Sheikh, even the traffic outside.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, we're very fortunate to have Sheikh here. And one thing that I didn't mention, that Sheikh, your topic today is one that I think goes deep for everyone. So the topic today is trauma and tawakkul.
Yeah, they gave me the hardest ones. So,
How our
yeah.
prophets handled it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Bismillah, Sheikh.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum ya kareem. Thank you, first of all, for having me. And I would like to say salam to everyone who's joining us live. When it comes to the topic of trauma, obviously it's a very sensitive one. And the more you kind of dig into it, the more you realize that the majority of people sometimes when they realize that they actually did suffer from trauma, mainly during childhood, they don't realize that except until later on in their life. In fact, many psychologists suggest that trauma is something that sits in your subconscious mind. And then you're not aware of it, but then after a while, as soon as something happens where a situation, you come across a certain situation and that just triggers, and then a reaction comes out. Now, when many times this reaction is dependent or related to a trauma that you've had as a child. Hence, in the religion of Islam, we always speak about healing. In fact, there's a beautiful narration that I always uphold and I love to speak of. I think the microphone is a bit too far. Yeah, hopefully this is better. Yeah, there's a beautiful narration by the Prophet ﷺ that I always try to uphold and I always try to live by, where it says, "Al-wiqayatu khayrun min al-ilaj," meaning that basically prevention or preventing the disease is a lot better than curing it. So it's always good to kind of seek prevention. It's always good to kind of protect yourself before getting into getting something. But at the end of the day, some stuff might happen. The beautiful thing about the religion of Islam is that when we reflect back on the Holy Quran and even the historical context in the Holy Quran, we notice that, in fact, the prophets and the messengers and even the awliya of Allah, their apostles, they never really had an easy life. I mean, if you think about it, there's actually almost something very much in common between the majority of the prophets, is that the majority of them, they had, one, to live away from their parents. Do you know what I mean? Two, they had to immigrate and leave their surrounding where they're comfortable with. And in reality, a human being would always feel better in his or her own surrounding, right? So that's something in common. I mean, beginning from Nabi Ibrahim, salawatu wasalam alayhi, Nabi Adam, if you think about it, had to leave paradise, you know, and that's a big thing. That by itself was, yes, absolutely. I mean, imagine being in paradise, it's a bliss. But then he had to leave paradise. He had to descend on earth, and he had to live on earth, and the humanity had to begin in that sense. And then even the prophets that would come after them, many of them had to leave their loved ones behind. And many of them had to begin a new chapter in their life, and many of them had to go through so many difficulties, let alone their surrounding. Their parents had to go through so many difficulties. So if we were to look back at them, something that always comes to my mind is that the Surah Al-Fatiha, in Surah Al-Fatiha, when we always recite Surah Al-Fatiha, there's a part where we say, "Oh, guide us to the righteous path," right? And then it says Sirat, and then it says Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you blessed. Now, when you think about this verse in reality, and as much as we recite it every day in our salat, you notice that we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us towards the path of those whom He blessed, which are obviously the Anbiya, the prophets, and the messengers, and the awliya, and the Ahlul Bayt, and all so forth. But then when we focus on their life, what kind of blessing are we talking about? You know what I'm trying to say? I mean, if you think about it, is it really a blessing? No, of course. I'm talking about in this worldly view. But in Allah's view, I mean, in the view of the Anbiya and the prophets and the messengers, of course, every single trial and tribulation that they had to go through was considered a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in reality, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us towards the path that has a lot of difficulty in it, right? And this path, of course, is difficult. It's a path of haqq indeed. And I think I've expressed a lot on numerous occasions in my lectures that the path of haqq requires a lot of sabr. So when we reflect back on the life of the Anbiya, we realize that the trauma that they had to endure, or a lot of difficulties that they had to live through in their life, they had to deal with it through many ways. And one of the best ways to actually think about it is that what they had in their mind, in the back of their head, was the notion of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whatever is really happening with them was literally from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence, it was something beautiful. And that's why, for instance, you find that in the Holy Quran, when it comes to the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, when he had to leave his father, when his brothers, when they conspired against him and they threw him in the well, and there was a carriage that came and picked him out of the well. He knew that Allah is basically designing a way for him to prepare him for the greatest role to come. Now, when Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam was asked about this, when this situation was arise in front of him, he says a beautiful verse in this regard, and he says, "Fasabrun jamil." You know, he didn't say just sabr, right? He didn't just say, "Oh, I'm gonna acquire it." No, no, no. It says sabrun jamil, and there's a difference between sabr and sabrun jamil. Meaning, sabr is that when you're forced to be patient and you don't have any other option. But Nabi Yaqub, being a prophet of Allah, messenger of Allah, of course had an option, but then he was enjoying that grief. It's almost as if it was a joy. Sure, it caused him a lot of pain. He went blind, mourning over Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, right? But then he said, "Fasabrun jameel," meaning that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined. Hence, I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna endure. I'm gonna acquire sabr, but then the beautiful type of sabr, which obviously our minds always go straight to Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam when she said, "What? Ma ra'aytu illa." So when she said Jamila, and obviously the Ahlul Bayt always speak the language of the Quran. There's a relation. Of course, in Hadith al-Thaqalain, they are the equal of the Quran. So Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, she's rooted upon this notion of sabr. But which sabr? Jamil. And that's why she says, "Ma ra'aytu illa Jamila." If you think about what is the beauty that she saw, you know, bodies slaughtered on the land of Karbala, you know, the captivity and so forth, and what came after it, to the point that Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam himself expresses that by saying that what's worse than Karbala is the captivity. This is what caused me a lot of pain. But Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam says, Jamil, ma ra'aytu illa Jamila. And this is why you find that when we reflect back on the lives of the prophets, the lives of the messengers, they all had to endure a lot of difficulties in their life. But it is always the notion of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, understanding that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Hence, this is the whole definition of Islam. Islam comes from the word taslim. I remember Sayyid Tabatabai in his tafsir, he talks about a verse about Nabi Isa alayhi salam. When he asks for support from his apostles, he explains it and he says a note that many of us might think that Iman is a higher level than Islam. He said, but understand that it's almost like a never-ending ladder, because there's an Islam higher than Iman, and then there's another Iman higher than Islam, and then he reaches to a conclusion where he says, reflect on what Imam Hussein alayhi salam did on the land of Karbala. That was the definition of Islam, meaning absolute submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes.
Sheikh, let's come in here and you share some amazing information and knowledge. Sheikh, we take a lot of experience, we take examples from our prophets,
Absolutely.
Imams, but the layman struggles to implement it.
True.
How can we implement? How can someone implement? Someone who's gone through a lot of trauma, how can they implement the complete acceptance of this trauma?
Absolutely. And I can totally understand. Many people sometimes are in a situation where maybe, and it could happen, that the last thing that they want to hear is that have to walk along Allah. Sometimes it's even a provocative statement, believe it or not. It sometimes might come across as something, okay, well, I do believe in Allah, but I need solutions. What I would say is that, generally speaking, the first thing that I would advise all the time, always seek help. So always try to pinpoint what is really wrong with you. You don't know what I'm trying to say? Is that a lot of us sometimes have a hard time facing our fears, which is important to do so. And sometimes it can happen in many different ways. For example, I know a lot of us sometimes come from a school of thought of, oh, so we need to let go, we need to forget. Well, maybe sometimes that's not the solution. Maybe sometimes the solution is for me to kind of confront what really caused me trauma. It could be a person. And, you know, and I don't have to do it violently. I can just sit down with a person and just sit down and say, you know what, this is what has happened because of the way, because of the harm that you've caused me in my life. You know, and then maybe that might help. So it all depends on the human being, him or herself, how they react to things in that way. But I personally believe that it's very difficult for someone, and again, it could vary from one person to another. It is very difficult for someone to get over a certain trauma without confrontation. See, confrontation sometimes can be healthy as long as it's a proper civil confrontation. You know what I mean? As long as you feel that you have acquired your rights. And I always focus on this in the religion of Islam. We believe in whoever stops you on the right, you turn the left. That's not something that we believe in. In fact, even in the religion of Christianity, not one Christian government ever did that. They never really turned the left cheek. In the religion of Islam, we believe that you should acquire your right. You should stand up for your right, and then after you acquire your right, you forgive for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And that's mainly because the religion of Islam understands our psyche. Allah creates and He understands our psyche is that human beings sometimes always feel like, you know what? I still feel hurt. I still feel oppressed. I still feel that I haven't gotten what I deserve yet, So in the religion of Islam, we're always pushed to actually acquire our right. In fact, it even goes into the fiqh perspective. The fiqh perspective sometimes tells you that there's a right that you have no right to let go of. Believe it or not. I'll give you an example. For example, let's say you do have an inheritance. The fiqh perspective says, and then let's say we reach out to you, we're your family, and we tell you, Shamal, you know what? There's an inheritance for you. The fiqh perspective does not allow you to say, oh, I don't want it. No. Actually says, no, you should acquire it. But first, when you acquire it, you want to let it go, that's your business. But first, you should acquire your right. Why? Because it wants to teach us discipline and balance in this regard. Because what if one day Shama goes back, say, well, that's mine, but you guys took it away from me, right? You don't get over it. So that's one point, is that always try to acquire your right, And I'm a big believer in teaching children from a very young age how to stand up for themselves, how to be able to acquire their rights. Sometimes we tend to do a big mistake, mainly in our culture, is that we kind of suppress the child's reaction. And even though he or she are a child, we go up to them and say, oh, no, don't do that. Or for example, let's say, just an example, they're playing in a playground and children are playing together and I don't know, they get attacked. Now we tell them, oh, no, don't do anything. It's okay. Your children. No, first wait for the child to make a reaction. It could be a peaceful one. It could be not. But let the child expose their own reaction. Let them feel the experience. And then after that, if it's wrong, sit them down and explain to them that you did something wrong. But do not suppress their uprising right away. Do not suppress that on the spot unless it gets overboard. That's a different story. But try to always give them that space. Do not try to suppress the reaction, because that would grow up with them. In fact, not too long ago, about 6 months ago, I was exposed to this study, which was extremely interesting. It is said one of the biggest mistakes you do to a child, and we do this in our culture a lot, like in our Arab culture, mainly Lebanese culture, as a child, you were taught from a young age, oh, kiss your auntie. Kiss, for example, if someone comes in, you're supposed to handshake them and kiss them and hug them. As a child, they say that's the biggest mistake, to push them to do that. Because that grows and causes a trauma when they are touched and they're not comfortable with it. They don't know how to react. They tend to freeze. They go like, okay, what do I do now? I lived all my life that, oh, I should sit on this person's lap and I should hug that person, and it's okay if this person touches me. So you know what I mean? But then you don't realize it when you grow up, and then someone touches you in a let's say in an inappropriate way, or you don't know what to do. You don't know how to react because you were never given the space in order for you to be able not to react in this regard. So it's important to allow reaction sometimes. Let them explore themselves. The Prophet ﷺ said, why do you think in a hadith he says, let the child be free the first 7 years? Now, of course, don't let them become an annoying child, but just let them expose there you go. Let them react. Let them give that reaction. It's important to do so. So I would say the first step is to heal. Second step is to always go back. Think. It's important to think and brainstorm. Ask questions. Ask your parents. Did anything happen with me as a child? Did I go through any experience? Some people don't know. They might have been, let's say, for instance, into a car accident, but they don't remember it. But it's stored in their subconscious mind. In fact, studies suggest that children have a photographic memory. If you go up to a child and you tell him, what's the name of your friend that you used to play with when you were a child, they won't remember. But if you tell them, where did you used to play? And they say, I remember that park. We used to play on that swing. So they have a photographic memory. We tend to underestimate that. And that what might cause trauma sometimes is that, we suppress the reaction, or something might happen and we just want to shove it under the rug, or something might happen and we just say, they'll get over it eventually. No. Healing is absolutely important. Hence, if I'm not mistaken, even in this very center, I was given a lecture about marriage, and I said the most important thing before you approach marriage is to heal from any type of trauma that you have, because you're going to carry that weight with you into someone else's life, and that someone don't know how to react. They don't know what's going on with you. Why are you acting this way? So it's absolutely important to heal and seek help. Then, while you're in the process of healing, always have a strong faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you and will always be with you.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we even spoke about healing before getting into a relationship, because then when you have a child, then generational trauma goes on to them.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult to break the cycle then.
Absolutely.
Sheikh, I have a question. When we speak about the prophets and the imams, and we know they have been through quite a lot in life, and we always taught this, even as children, we are taught, okay, this is what they went through. But we don't really speak about their problems as trauma. Yeah. So how significant is it for us to learn about what they went through in terms of trauma? Because even they were quite vulnerable in their way when they were speaking to God, for example. Yeah. They were quite vulnerable in the manner that they spoke with. And the fact that, like the Holy Prophet, he went through quite a lot. People used to harass him, call him a madman.
Yes.
And this affects, it did affect them quite greatly. Or like for Imam Sajjad, and when he saw butcher shop, and these things are quite, it's trauma, but we don't label it as such. How significant do you think it is to learn from it?
This is what I would say. You see, like you brought up a really good point, is that if we were to think, or if we were to dissect the experiences that they went through with a normal human being, you would say that this person must be traumatized. I mean, they went through a lot, they definitely will go through a lot. Now, obviously, when it comes to the prophets and the messengers in our aqidah, we believe that they are masumeen, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, though, they are people who went through those difficulties. The difference between them and maybe any other normal person is that from a very young age, they were prepared to do so. You got my point? And this is another thing that I would like to speak up tonight, is that with your children, it is important to prepare them for difficulties in life. I'll give you an example. There's a hadith that comes to mind by Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and it says, "Ikhshawshinu, فَإِنَّ النِّعَمَ لَا تَدُومُ." Roughen up your children, because blessings do not last. You know what I mean? So it's important to kind of prepare your child for whatever's going to come in this world. So I would say when it comes to the Masumeen, they were always prepared. They lived it. And like you said, we might refer to certain difficulties that might happen with certain families as generational trauma. Focus on the reply of Imam Zain al-Abidin when Abu Hamza al-Thamali entered upon him and he was mourning. And he was crying. And then when he asked him, are you crying over Shahad, the martyrdom of Imam Hussein? And he told him, martyrdom is a trend in our family. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I mean, that someone else might think that that's traumatizing, but to the Imam is like, martyrdom is a trend in our family. Well, if, the Bani Hashim from the beginning, they were rooted upon the notion of sacrifice. So the difference between them and the lay person is that they literally, if you were to think about it, they apply the verse that says, indeed, there's a moral in their narratives for those who possess intellect. I mean, the forefathers of Rasulullah, beginning from Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was put into the test of slaughtering his own son Ismail, isn't it? So they were rooted upon this perspective. They were raised upon this perspective. They understood what it meant, the difficulties, and then they were prepared to do so. And this is very important to do. Obviously, as a parent, always try to show your children a bit of reality. The problem with us sometimes, mainly in our cultures, is that we tend to shelter our children so much. We think we almost like we put them in a vessel, that we think this vessel is so immune from the outside diseases of the world. And that's absolutely wrong. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, they're going to be very shocked. And in fact, that they might be traumatized as soon as they go to the outside world and they realize, oh, things are not what I think they are. You know what I mean? So it's important to kind of prepare them for that. I remember one time I was listening to one of those businessmen, and it's really interesting their outlook on life. And then he said something interesting. He said, if my daughter comes up to me and asks me about the outside world, or if my son comes up to me and asks me about the outside world, I'm going to tell him the outside world is going to beat you down so hard. So you need to prepare yourself for it. You know, and therefore my job is to prepare you, is to give you the tools as to how to face it. Now, at the end of the day, there's only much I can do as a parent, right? And there's only much I can do as a human being. So I would say the first point is that we need to focus on is that they were prepared always. They lived it, they lived around it. The second thing is that their attachment to the divine from day one. And that's what I would say always made them steadfast on the path, is that they always understood that this is all for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what I mean? And that obviously developed as the absolute notion of tawakkul. You know, and or else, if you think about it, from a very young age, they were taught to do so. They were taught that everything that is happening in your life is simply because of the fact that you're on the path of haqq, and it's simply because of the fact that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's there. He's the absolute entity, the absolute powerful of all. And you do have certain struggles, or you will face certain struggles in life, but understand at the end of the day that your job, your reason of your creation is to set the example for others, to set that, to be that role model. And that by itself is not an easy job. I mean, of course, let alone the fact that they are masumin, but they are made to be the role model. Could you imagine sometimes, subhanAllah, I remember the first reaction I ever had when I had the privilege finally to visit Karbala after years and years of trying. The first thing that came to my mind is that, and personally, again, to each their own, everybody has their own outlook on ziyarah, is that what would the religion be without Hussein? Like, what would it be, you know? And obviously there's so many sacrifices in the religion of Islam. There's so many sacrifices from the prophets, but like, how would it be without Hussein alayhi salam? So reflection is important, you know what I'm trying to say? So when it comes to them, they were always able to possess that sense of setting the example, being the role model. Focus on the life of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam being inside the well. That by itself, as a child, you know, it's just something. It could be traumatizing, but it's because Nabi Yusuf was raised by Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam, being prepared for that role. Is that one day you will become a Nabi, let alone the level of imamah that you attain, as the Quran expresses. And there are certain difficulties and trials and tribulations that you're going to have to go through. You know what I mean? Or else focus on the reaction of Nabi Musa inside the well, or even when he was sold into slavery. He didn't object. You know what I'm trying to say? He didn't really object. He didn't put up a fight and say no. No, okay, fine. Because I know that I am made for a certain role. So it's important to do that. And it's important to always reflect on that. That's what I would say.
Sheikh, before we go into the Kahoot, a quick one. You know, some people, we know that someone is going to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctors give us time, whether it's 6 months, 8 months. And you know it's going to be traumatic. It is traumatic, it's going to be traumatic. Which prophets have experienced something like this that we can take lessons from?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you can just shed some light on which other prophets experienced some tough times?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say, if I was to think of it, many prophets were obviously had the knowledge of they were going to lose their children. For example, Nabi Ismail alayhi salam, with his father Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, even though the slaughtering never happened. But just the fact that he was given that order and command by Allah, it's by itself as something I don't know if any normal human being could imagine that. Now, or even moving on to the rest of the Anbiya, for instance, Nabi Nuh alayhi salam. Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, I think one of the most biggest challenges is that, as the Quran beautifully expresses, it's almost like the Quran gives you an imagery. You know, it's like a movie scene, you know, where the Quran says, obviously the verse says, Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, and the flood happened, the water started overwhelming everything, and then Nabi Nuh alayhi salam called upon his Lord saying, you know, this is my son. This is my son. Even though his son was not on his aqidah, you know, he called upon his son. He told him, like, why don't you come with me? And then he said, no. I'm gonna climb up to a peak of a mountain and I'll be protected. Then Nabi Nuh alayhi salam told him, no. This is the command of Allah. This is the decree of Allah. There's no protection from it. So why don't you come with me? And then the command from Allah came as that, you know what? Nuh, leave him behind. He's not from me. It's almost like the Quran says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. No, he is not from your household. Not because he was, some commentators suggested that maybe Nabi Nuh married a divorcee who had a son. And even though that could be the case, in fact, many Anbiya did that. But in reality, that wasn't the case. Salama, for instance, Rasulullah married Salama. She was a divorcee and she had children. And her son, one of the narrations suggests that he martyred with Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. But that wasn't the case, meaning that he's not from your household, meaning he's not on the, he's not on the same aqidah, he's not on the same belief, meaning your household are the people that are on your same belief, your same aqidah, your same, and that by itself is I always put myself in these situations. It's this beautiful hadith by Rasulullah that says, read the Quran as if it's been revealed to you. Like as if could you imagine that? Like the Prophet is saying, like, put yourself in my shoes. Like imagine yourself, you're me, and Jibreel is your. So sometimes when we read these, it's almost like there's an imagery. Kind of put myself and say, may Allah forbid. Could you imagine like having to go somewhere? Or could you imagine something is going wrong and we have to, I don't know, immigrate to Kaaba or somewhere like, and then my son, and I look back and I see my son drowning or losing himself, and I just have to turn around because the command from Allah to Nabi Nuh was, do not even look back. Could you imagine that? Like, and it's your son. It's that by itself is an experience, subhanallah, But then again, you think about Karbala. Nabi Nuh had to leave his son behind. Imam Hussein had to watch his son in front of him. So think about it. Nabi Nuh had to leave his son behind and walk away to be saved. Imam Hussein had to push his son forward. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And he had to watch him. He had to watch him to the point that Sayyidah Zainab said that when Ali Akbar entered the battlefield, I would look at the face of Hussein because that's how I would get the news. How I would get the. So that's amazing. That's astonishing within itself. So that's one example. Another example, if you think about it, which to me is the most difficult one, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a hadith by Rasulullah that says that there is no prophet that has been hurt more than me. Now, if you think about it, like, what did he mean? We have narrations that there were messengers and prophets that were cut off into pieces. That they were tortured to death. But what he meant to say is that the news that he receives, he received of ghaib, of what's going to happen to the Ahlul Bayt. And that by itself, he could only imagine the experience. Hence, Rasulullah would always cry, or whenever he would look at Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And then he had this special place in his heart for Imam Hussein. Or to the point that even the generation of Rasulullah would enter on the house of Imam Ali and Sayyidah Zahra, and Imam Hussein would be crying, and Rasulullah would be seen frustrated and telling Sayyidah Zahra, just let him stop. I cannot handle hearing Imam Hussein crying. So you can imagine only what's going to happen to him. How he told Sayyidah Zahra what's going to happen to her after his martyrdom, to the point that he told her, you'll be the first person that would follow up to me after my own martyrdom. You know what I mean? Imam Ali alayhi salam would have Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, leading up all the way to the rest of the Imams. That by itself is just so difficult, to know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? And then that this is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That this is the destiny from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what's been destined from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously being a prophet of Allah, accepting it. And not only this, but even glorifying it. Saying that, this religion is going to be preserved for one reason, the sacrifices of Ahlul Bayt. And so in this regard, or even if you think back a bit, Nabi Musa, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, the difficulty he had to go through, leaving his mother behind. She had to have that sense of, speaking of tawakkul, what absolute tawakkul, putting an infant, a newborn child, in a cradle or in a coffin, putting him in the river,
putting him in the river and then just leaving it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where would that river take him? Maybe there's a waterfall. Who knows what's going to happen? But then the Quran expresses beautifully is that he even gave a revelation for the mother of Musa. Is that feed him, put him in the coffin, and then shall bring him back to you. But then he never said when. And that by itself, sometimes what really hurts more is that knowing that your child is alive, but he or she are away from you, such as what happened to Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. And you can see the similarity between both, right? As Nabi Yusuf, Nabi Musa, both of them had to leave their parents behind from an early age, and both of them had to be raised where? In a house of a pharaoh, like in the headquarters of shirk, what I'm saying? But subhanallah, and both of them had to go through that challenge, and both of them had to hide their faith. They had to practice taqiyya in that sense, if you think of it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. I mean, we just don't want this to stop.
I
Continue, but
when you're talking about it, and it's not just the prophets, but people around them, the faith that they had is incredible.
Absolutely. If you think about the companions, the ones that stayed steadfast after the Prophet ﷺ, what they had to endure, the amount of abuse, the amount of harm or the amount of hurt, being deprived from their right. And many of them reacted, by the way, many of them could not handle it anymore. Many of them were like, you know what, this is not the path that I could handle anymore. And that's also considered a sense of trauma, is that they kind of given up. Or you could say they kind of submitted to their own trauma. You know what I mean? For example, many people you would hear in the uprising of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, telling Imam Hussein openly is that I cannot handle what's going to happen to my own children if I join you. You get the point, is that I cannot do that. This is something that I cannot handle, And some companions stayed steadfast, and they paid a very expensive price as a result of their own sacrifice. And many of them had children. Many of their women and their wives had to be traumatized as a result. We hear, for example, briefly speaking, about the wife of the brother of Abdullah ibn Abbas, the cousin of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Ubaidullah ibn al-Abbas, is that during that time when Bani Umayyah were in power, they sent an army to Yemen, and he was the governor of Yemen. The narration says clearly is that Bisr ibn Artat, who was the general of the army, he captured one of the children, one of the infants of Ubaidullah ibn al-Abbas, and he literally smashed his head into a wall. And his mother literally lost her mind at that moment right away. And she says a very painful couplet of poetry in this regard. And that's all as a result for being the cousin of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Do you imagine that? Aqil, the brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says something. He says, one time a man, because he was blind, right? He said, one time a man saw me walking on the street, and he approached me and he told me, let me help you to your house. I said, thank you. He said, what's your name, by the way? He said, Aqil ibn Abi Talib. And he literally just took me and threw me in a well. Because I'm blind, I didn't see the well. So could you imagine that? Just simply to be related to Imam Ali alayhi salam, what Bani Hashim had to endure. And what we see sometimes, what happens to the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, such as in Kuwait, such as Parachinar, such as, Afghanistan, certain parts of the world where the Shias of the Ahlul Bayt, and many of them are traumatized in this regard, you know what I mean? And you speak to them and the experiences that they had to go through, it's just something unheard of. Yeah.
Amazing. I think let's move into the Kahoot.
Yes.
And then we'll come back. So Sheikh is still here. You can still take some more questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. But for now, let's move into the Kahoot quickly. I hope you've been listening. I've been taking in everything, and subhanAllah, Sheikh, I think we're going to sit again after this.
Absolutely. I'm at your service anytime.
Let's get the Kahoot link up.
Okay, are we ready for today's Kahoot? The game pin is 2630433. We're going to give you guys a few seconds to join. And I think after a 2-day break, they should be hyped for the Kahoot today.
So we've not put up the leaderboard today. We said after today, we'll bring up the latest leaderboard. But as always, please log in with the names that you've been logging in every single day. That way we keep track of it. So yeah, Sister Shazia, I had some people messaging and saying, on the first day when we didn't have, like, they logged in thinking, where's the link? Waiting for it, subhanAllah. So it's reaching
yes.
far and wide. And
Yes.
I think that's been the goal from day one. that-
Definitely, that is the goal. Affecting just one person and touching just one person's life makes a huge difference.
Okay, we'll give it just 10-15 more seconds
Yes.
because I want to get back into questions with Sheikh.
With Sheikh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's everyone. Or
Yeah,
few
I
people last
think,
time missed out. So I think let's give it 5 more seconds.
Yes, please log in as fast as you can.
Yep.
We're getting more sign-ins. Yes.
Shall we go?
Okay.
Let's begin.
Okay, let's start. Question number 1 for day 7 of the Kahoot. How many times was Nabi Ayub mentioned in the Quran? Is it A, 13 times? Is it B, 4 times? Is it C, 3 times? Or is it D, 152 times?
Getting in the answers very fast.
Yes, it's B, 4 times.
Okay, remember it's fastest finger first. Question number 2. What was Nabi Yusuf's most significant challenge? He had no challenges. Practicing patience through resisting temptation, the darkness of the well, or was it practicing tawakkul? What was his most significant challenge? Yes, the correct answer is practicing patience through resisting temptation. Yeah.
I think this time the questions are quite tricky. What was the similarity between Nabi Yusuf's childhood and Nabi Musa's childhood? Both were with their biological parents, both didn't hide their faith, both were mistreated by their brothers, or the last one, both were raised in a house of a pharaoh.
It's quite a lot of similarities, by the way.
Quite a lot,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, it's D. Both were raised in a house of a pharaoh.
Okay, question number 4. What was Nabi Nuh's most difficult challenge? Was it being tested with his son who was a non-believer? Was it building the ark? Was it having a wife who was a non-believer? Or was it getting all the animals on board the ark? Very good. I think people were listening very well when Sheikh just explained that. Yes, it was when his son was a non-believer and he wanted to get him onto the ark. Yeah.
Question number 5. Which verse describes the level of tawakkul that Prophet Musa possessed and in what stage? Is it 2762 when he was labeled a magician? Is it 1963 when he approached the burning bush to talk to Allah? Is it 2663 when he was followed by the Pharaoh and reached the sea? Or is it 2563 when he had to grow up in the Pharaoh's house?
We leave this on general knowledge.
Yes, it's definitely C when he was followed by the Pharaoh and reached the sea. Absolutely.
Okay, and we go to question 6 for tonight, which is based on the daily activity list. What did you have to learn on day 7? Was it a new hobby, a new sport, a new Quranic verse, or a new language? think all these are very good to implement. But a
Very.
new Quranic verse,
Yeah, I think the whole point of this activity was that when you learn something new, it consistently it helps with well-being.
yes, and it stays with you as well.
Yes.
Okay, the correct answer was a new language.
Very well done to everyone. In third place, we have Sister Zainab. In second place, we have Sana and Shaista. And in first place, we have Sister Zara Devjani. Very well done to everyone. And
Excellent.
yeah, we can now move on to the Q&A. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them and ask, and we will try our best to answer each and every one.
Okay, so let's get into it. And today, I'll apologize in advance. We will go 10 minutes, inshallah, over, just so that we can get the most out of Sheikh Wael with the mountain of knowledge that he is. Alhamdulillah. Sheikh, continuing from what we were talking about, how important is it for us to build resilience? Like how our prophets, our imams, and all of them, they had it. How important is it for us?
Because you did mention that when they were growing up, they were already taught about,
Absolutely.
of everything that they're going to face.
Absolutely.
And with what is going on in Palestine as well, you see an
Absolutely.
incredible amount of resilience.
Absolutely.
We even spoke about this with Sister Farzana the other day, and that's why this question: why is it so important to build resilience, and how can we build resilience?
Absolutely. First of all, this is what I would say, is that as a human being, or even as a Muslim individual in particular, growing up, it is absolutely important to acquire abilities. And it is absolutely important to focus on many things at the same time. We'd be amazed how much children have the ability to absorb at a very young age. You know, I'm sure many of us have met children at the age of 5 who can speak 3 or 4 different languages. I have a friend of mine that he's married into the Hazara community, and he's Punjabi, and his son speaks Punjabi with him, and on the spot shifts to Dari with his mom. And then at the same time in school he speaks fluent English, Arabic. So on the spot. So that's one thing. So that means it tells us that children are able to absorb. I believe that a Muslim community, we need to focus on body, mind, and soul. Meaning, first of all, acquiring knowledge. But then again, we need to put less pressure on expecting always our children to become only geniuses, and then let them expend their energy. So I really think it's very important for someone to acquire mental, physical strength, spiritual strength. Focus on your ibadat, and at the same time have a physical activity that you can gain strength on. In my opinion, if you were to ask, and I sound a bit harsh on this, there's absolutely no reason for any younger Muslim, male or female, to grow up not being healthy and fit. In fact, everything in our religion focuses on that. Everything in our religion is shifted towards that. Every single individual of the Ahlul Bayt, let alone even Bani Hashim themselves, they always focus not only on the spiritual and the mental strength, but also on the physical strength. Our prophets, they were strong men. The women of the Ahlul Bayt, they were strong. They, Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, she was one of the best horse riders if she wanted to ride a horse. You get the point. It's to the point that even when she was playing sometimes, as that naturally she was able to sit on her father's back, pretending that as if it was a horse, like by nature. So that's something that's in their instinct and something that you pass on. In fact, this is something that I would say is that strengthen yourself as much as you can. Be a fit person, healthy person. It's really interesting. I listen sometimes to the Gracie brothers, the ones obviously that come from the Gracie family that invented jiu-jitsu. They said, when you know how to fight, you will know how to end a fight before it even begins. So sometimes it's absolutely important. Learning mixed martial arts is very important. You need to be able to defend yourself. Being fit, being healthy, combining that with religion, with your faith, which provides you with a lot of strength, In fact, if you focus on the religion of Islam, it provides you with a discipline on how to always be healthy and fit. You know what I mean? When do you start your day? Don't stay up late at night. And I always say this to the younger generation nowadays. You waste your life. You are wasting your life in this way. Because at this age right now, you're ruining yourself. You don't you eat more, you gain more weight. You know what I mean? The next day you don't want to do anything. You're not in the mood to do anything. You don't need to do this to yourself. Especially, mashallah, the community in Dubai. I mean, the weather is beautiful. To me, it is. I don't like the cold. I don't cope well with the colds. You know, it's interesting. In Canada, my doctor said to me, he said, it doesn't matter. Even if you stay here for the rest of your life, you'll never get used to the cold because you were born and raised in Dubai. You're used to the heat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do activities and have community activities. You know what I'm trying to say? So not only sports is very important. Hit the gym. You know what I mean? And I say this, and mainly for girls, learn how to defend yourself. It is extremely important. I have a daughter. I want her to learn mixed martial arts. I want her to learn how to defend herself because who knows what's going to happen later on in the days. You know, it's strong women that raise strong men. They raise warriors. There's a reason why back in the days, I remember during the beginning of the Israeli invasion to Palestine, they would always focus on breaking the will of the mothers because they know that these mothers are raising warriors. Now, alhamdulillah, that never happened. We've seen those warriors. You know what I mean? In Lebanon, in Iraq, in Pakistan. So that will, that love, and alhamdulillah, like we have that connection with Karbala, right? You know, and that sense of always resisting, the sense of always rising up. It's in us. It's something rooted in us. You know what I mean?
Standing up for it.
Absolutely standing up for oppression, not accepting it. But before you do it, learn how to do it. It is extremely important to learn how to do it. So easy to give a reaction. But sometimes when you give a reaction when you don't know how, you tend to develop a resilient personality. Sometimes it can be negative. A resilient personality in a way that, why him, not me? Why her, not me? You know what I'm trying to say? You know, for example, they say, the recent studies, they suggest feminism appeals a lot to a resilient personality. You know, like, oh, why can a man do this? And I can't do it. But then some men go, oh, why can a woman do that without me do, you know, I can't do that. So, but understanding how to organize your thoughts or organize your reaction will make you a proper person. You'll know exactly when to stand up, the right time to do it, and how to do it. It is important to do so. I remember one of the most things that changed my outlook on life is the topic of studying logic in Hausa. So the science of logic that was, it was invented by Aristotle, right? The great philosopher, who Prophet Muhammad refers to him as a prophet of Allah, by the way. Yes. On the other hand, you would notice that the definition of logic is what? And it makes perfect sense. That if you open the book in the beginning of the introduction, is that as a human being, you think. Then do you know how to think constructively? You know, I mean, thoughts are in your mind, but do you know how to think? Okay. So, and the same thing with physicality. Reaction is in you, but do you know how? You know what I'm trying to say? If you were falling, you naturally, no one has to teach you how to put your hands first, right? Right. But then how do you fall? I'm sure if everybody here is football fans, you'd notice that in football, sometimes people, they wonder is that if you watch football training, they teach them how to fall because in a foul, if you're getting fouled and you're falling, you need to fall properly or else you might injure yourself. You know, the same thing with fighting, with boxing, they teach you how to fall. You know what I mean? In boxing, it's the science of mind and body connecting together because when you get knocked out, your body's telling you to get up, but your mind is telling you to go to sleep. You know, you need to stay sleeping. And then that's why you find that sometimes they pick them up or they do get up, but they're not aware. You know what I mean? So it's important to learn how to do things. This is very important in my opinion. Yeah.
I think we have a question that's coming in.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. A sister is asking, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Can you please share some advice on what one should do for the beloved who has been told does not have much time to live?
I'm sorry, repeat that again. For a beloved?
Yes. So
That's been
for
told.
a beloved
Okay.
who has been told that
Yes.
he or she does not have much time to live.
Much time to live.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too philosophical, but you know, it's interesting. Sayyid Sistani has a beautiful article about defining death. I know we think about Amaraja, they just give fatwas. No, 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 no. In fact, Sayyid Sistani has a study that was documented by NASA, believe it or not. On the other hand, a lot of our ulama, they come to death. Is that, what is it? You know what I mean? What I would say is that, what is life? So when we say we don't have much time to live, well, live where? On this earth? Yes. You see, the pain in death is not to the person that dies. It is to the people that are around him, because they're not going to be, he's not going to be around them in flesh anymore. Do you get my point? But in reality, is that live where? You see, as Muslims, we are not made for this world. We want to live the afterlife. That's the life. That's exactly what, subhanAllah, that's the life where you're given an idealistic body, where you are given so much power to roam around. It's very similar to dreams, right? Because in a dream, sometimes you see yourself, you're standing on top and you could see 3 different countries at the same time. That's exactly what death is about. So you're basically living, but in a different dimension. You know what I mean? So that's life. Second is that, what I would say is that focus on the reward. Focus is on who you're going to see. Ahlul Bayt, for example, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was on his deathbed, he was asked the question, "Oh Muhammad, do you want more time on earth?" Said, "No, I miss my Lord so much. I have so much grief to see my Lord. I want to meet my Lord." Do you know what I mean? Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "Ar-Rafiq al-A'la." Oh, no. The friend. Do you imagine referring to Allah as a friend? And Allah is everybody's friend. And Allah is our caregiver. I would say that it's going to be sad for the person when the loved one would depart from this earth, but they are present in soul, and tell them to focus on the happy times that they had here and the happier times they will have there. And this is the best that I can say. It's tough, it's hard, but subhanallah,
It's always more difficult for the people left behind.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, why do you think that the death person, maybe that would be a worthy topic to discuss from time and part, is the definition of death and what happens and before and after. But there's a stage where we call sakaratul maut, right? And then after, as soon as your soul exits, in fact, you start looking at people and you're like, why are they crying? I'm happy, I'm fine. I'm actually, a really interesting point I would like to make here. How long does a child, or how long does a baby stay in his mother's womb?
9 months.
9 months, right? See, how big is the womb? It's very small, right? There's water inside. That infant is aware, right? He's aware that he is in, and that's why he or she, they cry as soon as they exit. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, to a human being, there are 3 main cries. The first one is that when they move from the scattering world to this world, to the world of being a clot and entering a womb. The second cry is that when they exit the womb to this world. And the third cry is that when they exit this world into the hereafter. Because this is their comfort zone. But then if you compare the womb, you look at the womb, it's very small. It's full of water, right? You're swimming in water. Compare it to the grave. You see, is the grave very small? No, it's in fact more roomy than the womb, if you were to think about it, right? Secondly, what's in the grave? Is it your body and soul? Like that when you're in the womb? No, it's only your body. It's that flesh. It's your body. Your soul is somewhere else. Your soul, hopefully, if you're a good person, you're steadfast on deen, it is absolutely in Jannat Adan, in that paradise. So it's funny that we tend to look at the womb as being our comfort zone, but then we're scared from the grave. Why should we? Why would we be scared from the grave? It's only the body. You're leaving that body behind. You're stripping it off, and then you're taking another idealistic body. Yeah.
Wow. It's about taking tawakkul to a whole different level.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has so much mercy on us. Allah has Allah has so much mercy on us to the point that, I mean, I mean, if you think about it, there's so many traditions that would get us into a whole different topic in this
Yeah.
regard. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's always longing for Allah's mercy, having that tawakkul. And this is what I would always say. I remember one of our teachers taught us something that was very interesting, and so it's very good that you mentioned that. Thank you, because it brought up to my attention. And he used to say that these are the 3 T's that I want you to live by: tafakkur, tawassul, tawakkul. So first of all, tafakkur, reflect. Always think before you do something. In Islam, we don't believe that you start something and say tawakkal. No. Always reflect. Always think. Right? Tafakkur. And not only fikr, tafakkur. Like overly, try to think properly before you take a step. The second, when you decide, do tawassul. Right? Seek nearness to Allah through the Ahlul Bayt, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you better by the sake of the Ahlul Bayt. The third one, tawakkul. And then just leave it to Allah to decide the outcome of it. So those are the 3 T's: tafakkur, tawassul, tawakkul. Yeah.
Such gems that
Yeah.
Astaghfirullah.
You take a lot.
No,
Take
astaghfirullah.
away.
Yeah.
I'm humble.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but
Today,
we could go on, yeah?
yes, it's always great to have you, Sheikh.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. It's my honor. Thank you so much. I'm really happy that I'm back in Dubai. I'm really happy that I'm lecturing here again. Inshallah, I will be back in January also.
And inshallah, we're
Yeah.
booking you from now, Sheikh, in our
Absolutely.
studio. We're going to
I'll
have
be-
another session with
I'll
you.
be honored.
A
I'll be
longer
honored.
More
session.
collaborations.
Absolutely.
inshallah, in the future.
I'll be honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think we move on now to closing of the session. We
Yes.
have, as always, the book of the day. And I'll leave that to Sister Shazia to take you through the book of the day.
Yes, please do go through the activities calendar as well. And because we don't have much time, we're going to go directly to the book. So the book for today is by Gabor Mate, who has been mentioned a couple of times last year as well, and this year. His book is called The Myth of Normal, which is about trauma, illness, and healing in a toxic culture. The excerpt that I have chosen is: it doesn't matter whether we can point to other people who seem more traumatized than we are, for there is no comparing suffering. Nor is it appropriate to use our own trauma as a way of placing ourselves above others. When you say you haven't suffered like I have, or as a cudgel to beat back others' legitimate grievances when we behave destructively. We each carry our wounds in our own way. There is neither sense nor value in gauging them against those of others. And I think this does rope in the tafakkur that you mentioned, that we need to always think, despite being in our own trauma, what other people are also going through.
Absolutely. No, I mean that what you chose, honestly, that's amazing. It's wonderful, because that's something that, you know, if you think, like we said, we talk about the messengers and the prophets, they're not in a competition who suffered more.
Yeah.
You know, and no one, and this is one thing I said maybe not yesterday, the day before in my lecture. It's a sense of dismissal of emotions.
Yeah.
Right? Is that when you tell a person, oh, no, I've been through worse than that. You know, no, it doesn't matter. You know, there's a beautiful verse in the Quran, and I want this to be someone that a verse that the viewers, I want them to reflect upon. It's important not to always resort to tafsir. You yourself try to move your mind about the Quran. That's the beauty about the Quran. It's called قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ. Let each act according to their own condition. You never know. I mean, what could affect you could be worse to another person. What could affect me could be less painful to another person. So yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm definitely gonna have a look into that book. Thank you, and thank you for honestly. You guys have been great.
Yeah,
Yeah, honestly, you guys have been great.
Thank you for coming all this way
Astaghfirullah,
and
thank you so
sharing
much.
so much.
Oh,
And I'm sure everyone agrees with us that it's been a phenomenal session. As we said at the start, that today we have a special guest in the house.
mhm.
And inshallah, the video will be up for those of you who've missed it, who can watch it again. But until tomorrow, when we're back again, we end today and say good night, God bless, and goodbye.
Thank you.